I've been briefed this morning by the Attorney General of the United States, the Director of the FBI. I've spoken with the Governor, and I'll be speaking with the Mayor on the aircraft. We're working very closely with the state and local law enforcement officials, and they're going to keep me updated as they learn more. You're going to ask me to speculate, understandably, you'd ask me to speculate about what happened, why it happened, and I'm not going to do that now because we don't have all the information, not until I have all the facts. But I do know this, as president, I'm going to use all the resources at my disposal to keep the American people safe. As I said, at this moment, a great deal remains unknown, but three things are certain. First, 10 lives have been lost, and more families have been shattered by gun violence in the state of Colorado. And Jill and I are devastated, and the feeling, I just can't imagine how the families are feeling, the victims whose futures were stolen from them, from their families, from their loved ones, who now have to struggle to go on and try to make sense of what's happened. Less than a week after the horrific murders of 8 people and the assault on the AAPI community in Georgia, while the flag was still flying half-staff for the tragedy, another American city has been scarred by gun violence and the resulting trauma. And the state, I even hate to say it because we're saying it so often, my heart goes out. Our hearts go out for the survivors, who had to flee for their lives and who hid, terrified, unsure if they would ever see their families again, their friends again. The consequences of all this are deeper than I suspect we know. By that I mean the mental consequences, the feeling of, anyway, it's just been through too many of these. The second point I want to make is my trauma. And the state, I even hate to say it because we're saying it so often, my heart goes out. Our hearts go out for the survivors, who had to flee for their lives and who hid, terrified, unsure if they would ever see their families again, their friends again. The consequences of all this are deeper than I suspect we know. By that I mean the mental consequences, the feeling of, anyway, it's just been through too many of these. The second point I want to make is my deepest thanks to the heroic police and other first responders who acted so quickly to address the situation and keep the members of their community safe. And to state the obvious, I commend the exceptional bravery of Officer Eric Talley. And I send my deepest condolences to his family, his close family and 7 children. You know, when he pinned on that badge yesterday morning, he didn't know what the day would bring. I want everybody to think about this. Every time an officer walks out of his or her home and pins that badge on, the family member that they just said goodbye to wonders whether they'll subconsciously, will they get that call, the call that his wife got. He thought he'd be coming home to his family and his 7 children. But when the moment to act came, Officer Tully did not hesitate in his duty, making the ultimate sacrifice in his effort to save lives. That's a definition of an American hero. And thirdly, I want to be very clear. This is the one thing I do know enough to say on in terms of what's happened there. While we're still waiting for more information regarding the shooter, his motive, the weapons he used, the guns, the magazines, the weapons, the modifications that apparently have taken place to those weapons that are involved here, I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country once again. I got that done when I was a senator. It passed. It was law for the longest time. And it brought down these mass killings. We should do it again. We can close the loopholes in our background check system, including the Charleston loophole. That's one of the best tools we have right now to prevent gun violence. The Senate should immediately pass. Let me say it again. The United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the 2 House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system. These are bills that receive votes of both Republicans and Democrats in the House. This is not and should not be a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It will save lives, American lives, and we have to act. We should also ban assault weapons in the process. I'll have much more to say as we learn more, but I wanted to be clear. Those poor folks who died left behind families that leaves a big hole in their hearts. And we can save lives, increasing the background checks so that they're supposed to occur, and eliminating assault weapons, and the size of magazines. We don't know all the detail yet on that. But I'll be talking to you more later today or in the next couple of days about what else we know. May God bless you all and those families who are mourning today because of gun violence in Colorado and Georgia, all across the country. We have to act so there's not more of you, there's fewer of you as time goes on. Thank you so much.
Will you introduce new gun legislation, Mr.
President Biden there in the state dining room at the White House before departing the White House for a pre-scheduled trip this afternoon. He talked about urging the House and the Senate to act on legislation, pieces of legislation he said that have already been passed by the House. He said that both the House and the Senate can act to close loopholes, ban assault weapons, and the size of magazines. He talked about the victims in Boulder, Colorado, the victims in Atlanta as well. And he talked about the officer, Eric Talley, an 11-year veteran and father of 7 there in Boulder. And he said every time an officer puts on that badge, a family wonders on some level if that loved one will come home at the end of the day. And it was his wife, Eric Talley's wife, who got the call. We heard from the mayor of Boulder, the police chief of Boulder as well, and officials on the ground in Colorado who were deeply moved today. The police chief saying that officer and his 7 children were just in her office a couple of weeks ago as they gave this officer an award. And they went out of their way to point out today that he had a previous career, that he chose his work as a police officer in that community, and that he ran into that store, into the line of fire to try to save officers. I want to bring in our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, who's on the ground there today. And the ages of these victims, Matt, we can't state this enough. 20, 23, 25, all the way up to 62, 65 years old. Many were there obviously simply to buy groceries. Others were there, lined up to get their COVID vaccinations.
David, and it leaves a gaping wound in this community. And you can see that behind me in that supermarket, SWAT teams actually carved out entire windows to try to gain some entrance into the supermarket itself. Behind me, there's a growing memorial, people plugging sunflowers into the chain link fence, leaving flowers in that tapestry behind. And you mentioned it. It was that police chief who in so many ways encapsulated the hurt of this entire community, who'd been so close with Officer Talley, who had had his entire family in her office. And really, she was representative of this entire community and the pain that it's suffering. We haven't spoken to all the victims' families, but in many ways, she did speak for them. And law enforcement officials tell us that it's going to be at least 5 days before they finish the investigation inside there, and they are going to be very careful, they said, to put together as meticulous an investigation as possible, which is why they're going to bring all the resources they can, including the FBI, in order to ensure that they can bring the suspect to justice and try to provide just a little bit of closure for the families of the victims, David.
Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. We know the gunman was the only one shot who actually survived this, identified as 21-year-old Ahmad Alyssa from nearby Arvada, Colorado. That's north of Denver, south of Boulder. We also know that he's now been charged with 10 counts of murder. Authorities say he was shot in the leg. They're preparing to transfer him from the hospital to jail. We know that he came to the U.S. from Syria at the age of 3. He's lived here, obviously, most of his life, an American citizen. Police still with no motive. And you heard President Biden there say just moments ago he's been briefed by the Attorney General, the director of the FBI, but he went out of his way to say he would not speculate on a motive. I want to bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. And Pierre, I know millions of Americans who thought they were just beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel, at the end of this pandemic tunnel, are now wondering, given what we saw in Atlanta last week and now in Boulder, Colorado in the last 24 hours, is this what we're now going to deal with as we emerge from this pandemic?
David, we've all been justifiably focused on the pandemic, but this phenomenon of mass shootings has quietly gotten much, much worse even as the pandemic unfolded. We've been looking at some numbers from the Gun Violence Archive, David, and in 2018, there were 337 mass shootings. By last year, 2020, that number had almost doubled to 611. And so we're seeing houses of worship, we're seeing schools, we're seeing the Walmart, now a grocery store. All these places that we know and love, that we congregate in, now the target, David. And law enforcement officials are deeply concerned that this phenomenon is getting worse, and they have to figure out a way to get on the front side of this before these tragedies happen, David.
Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you in our Washington Bureau, and Molly Nagel on our White House team makes an excellent point moments ago. And take a look at this image of the flag at the White House. Less than a day after the flags were returned to full staff after being lowered to honor the victims from the shootings in Atlanta, President Biden has once again now ordered the flags to be lowered to half staff for the victims now in Boulder until sunset on Saturday. Just an extraordinary week here in America. Former President Barack Obama out with a statement a short time ago saying, we can make it harder for those who have hate in their hearts to buy weapons of war. We can overcome opposition by cowardly politicians and the pressure of a gun lobby that opposes any limit on the ability of anyone to assemble an arsenal. We can and we must. And then he hit on that point that I think a lot of Americans are wondering as we try to come out of this pandemic, the other side of the pandemic. He said a once-in-a-century pandemic cannot be the only thing that slows mass shootings in this country. Our thanks to Pierre Thomas, to Matt Gutman on the ground there in Boulder. We'll have a complete report coming up a little later this afternoon on World News Tonight. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and at abcnews.com. I'll see you a little later today. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.